Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah. This is my granny era. Today I am going to talk to you guys about my book haul for the month of December. So I have quite a few books here that I either got as a gift or I gifted to myself or I found in little free libraries. I shopped my local bookstore that's in my library, as well as my favorite bookshop here in Northwest Arkansas. So I've got quite a selection here of really good stuff that I'm excited about. The first stuff I'm going to share with you are the books that I got from my husband. He gifted me with 4 books in December. The first one is this one called Star Over Bethlehem by Agatha Christie Malwin. And this is a collection of short stories that all are sort of centered around the idea of Christmas, or just what Christmas embodies as far as, you know, peace on earth, goodwill toward men, treating people well, that kind of stuff. And I talked a little bit about this in the video that I made concerning my reads for December, and then how I just appreciated her mentality of remembering all kinds of people, not just people who carry the label of Christ. Just remembering that all people are deserving of compassion and kindness and respect and etc. So I think that Agatha Christie, in a way, sort of took the same sort of cynical view that I have on organized religion, but in her heart probably had a pretty good relationship with God. And I kind of feel that same way. Like, I have a lot of issues with organized mainstream Christianity, but I definitely don't have issues with my God or his son. So I really enjoyed reading these stories just because a lot of them are from a perspective that I think I would have written from as well. And I also really appreciated how diverse they were, and even in the narrative voice of the stories was very diverse. I really admire that about her as an author. She's not just a simple old lady writing little stories. She has quite a, she's very intelligent and quite a craft. So I was glad to have this. It's a special edition for me as far as, you know, what it is. It's a first edition published in the UK, not readily available here in the US. I've never seen a copy of this anywhere here. And it was a pretty good price tag at our bookshop in the rare books section. So I appreciated that my husband went and got that. All right, the next book he got me was Piranesi by Susanna Clark. I've been wanting to read this. Everybody's talking about it. It sounds really good. I'm not like a fantasy sort of person, but I think that the story is kind of a fantasy sort of story. And so yeah, I'm gonna give it a try. But it just sounded really good, and maybe I need it. The thing I struggle with fantasies is I don't necessarily struggle with the idea of a, you know, fantastical sort of story. I struggle with the idea of made up like beasts, like fantastical beings, right? So like, I don't know, just some kind of like talking horse-headed, mouse-bodied beastie guy with 7 toes or something. Like, it just, I don't know. If I can't imagine it in my head, like if I can't imagine it really happening, then I struggle with it. So, you know, I don't do good with like talking animal stories and that kind of stuff because it's hard for me to imagine. Like, that just goes too far. But if it's sort of fantastical things that happen to humans and things that they encounter, I don't know where the line is. Anyway, I think I'm gonna like Piranesi. So got me that. And then he got me Plato, The Last Days of Socrates. So both one of my daughters and I are really getting into reading more philosophy and about philosophers. And so I had put a few philosophy books on my list that I owned once upon a time and, you know, just didn't keep around. So looking forward to reading The Last Days of Socrates. And then he got me this copy of Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Now, this copy was also at that same bookshop that we love to go to. It's my favorite one here. It's called Once Upon a Time Books. They also have a website. But this copy, this particular edition, matches a edition of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that my aunt gave me when I was a little girl. And so I saw this when we were in there shopping, and I was like, Jamie, here's the books I want. So I showed him that Agatha Christie one, and I showed him this one, and he ended up getting them both free, which is really kind. So now I have the matching set of these books about Charlie. All right, and then let's go with the books I gifted to myself. So I don't have all of them here, so I'll put pictures up of 2 of them. One of them was a collection of Christmas stories, like it's a Penguin collection of Christmas stories. I didn't end up getting to that, so I will read it next year. The other one is a collection of stories by O. Henry, which again, I did not get to this year. I picked it up because the front of it says The Gift of the Magi, and it has his story about the couple. I don't know if you guys have read that. It's a really good story about a couple on Christmas Eve and how they went to bless one another. But it's full actually of several stories by O. Henry, and I also did not get to that one this year, and so I'll put those away for next year. But I did get to the story of the Nutcracker by Alexander Dumas. Now, I'm not a fan of this story, but I thought the cover was really pretty. And I have owned this book in the past, actually, and I just, I unhauled it a while back, so I got myself another copy. But I went out on Christmas Eve, and I was like, I don't have any Christmas books. So I went to Barnes & Noble and just, like, bought a stack of everything I could find that wasn't, like, you know, that looks kind of classic-y. But I did read this, and it's not the ballet. I want the ballet. I want everything all pretty and magical and sweet and gentle warfare. Instead, it was kind of creepy and kind of rude and just crude. I don't know. I did not enjoy the story at all. I don't know if it's just Alexander Dumas. I don't know if the original story is that way, because I have not read the E.T.A. Hoffman version either. That is on the list for December for our children's classic read-along that I'm hosting. And so I might find that I like that one, or I might find that it's the same bloody, mean story that this one is, and I might be just as disappointed. But I don't know, maybe I'll just stick to the ballet. But this had a lot of, yeah, it just wasn't, the beginning was kind of magical, the end was kind of magical, but throughout the story I just kept asking myself, why are these parents letting their children be exposed to this creepy godfather Drosselmeyer? He is a weird dude. I don't understand. That, I guess, is my biggest thing. I just feel like those parents needed to be better parents. All right, and then the next kind of weird, sort of Christmassy, sort of creepy book that I got was called The Night Before Christmas by Nikolai Gogol. This is not 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, the poem by Clement Seymour that everyone is familiar with. This is a Russian author who I guess is really popular in Russia. I don't think I've ever read anything by a Russian author, and I'm not familiar with this guy, but this story was written in 1831, and yeah, I bought it for the cover. I really did, but it looks super festive. The only thing Christmassy about this is I think it takes place on the night before Christmas. That's kind of it. It says it's an uproarious tale. I don't know, maybe I was just distracted. I didn't find it funny or engaging. It's just more battles. This guy Vacula is in love with Oksana, but so is the devil. He's also in love with Oksana, so like fighting over Oksana, and Oksana is just like full of herself and just sits around on a tuffet like Miss Muffet. And I guess it is based on Ukrainian folktales, so you know, maybe it's better in the actual oral telling than the story and then the actual written English translation. But I didn't enjoy it so much. I'll probably read it again someday, but I'm glad that it was short. I bought myself a copy of Pamela by Samuel Richardson. I have a copy of this, but it was all annotated. I didn't realize that. And I'm going to be reading this hopefully for Epistolary January, and also for the Jane Austen birthday challenge that Anne is doing at In Search of Wonder. And in that challenge, you're supposed to read something from your shelves. So this is technically supposed to be coming from my shelves, but technically it is, because like I said, I did have a copy of it on my shelves and did not realize that it was all annotated, and I wanted to annotate it myself. So it's a replacement for something that was on my shelf. It counts in my opinion, but gonna read that hopefully. And then I got this book called The Nature of Fragile Things by Susan Meissner, and I got this from Paperback Swap, and so sometimes it's hit and miss on the condition, but it looks like it's unread, so it's pretty much a new book. This story is all centered around the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. A young Irish immigrant answers a call for a mail order bride. So she leaves New York to head to San Francisco to marry somebody that she doesn't know, because that's what they did when they wanted to get out of town, I guess. And then when she gets there, the earthquake happens, and so it just kind of has this little story that's, you know, surrounding that time. I like Susan Meissner. The first book I've ever read by her, I can't remember what it's called, but took place around the Salem witch trials, and it was a very compassionate story about a woman who was accused of being a witch, and I think even her daughter. I really liked it, and I like her as an author. I read another book by her, and I can't remember what it was, but it was centered around the Spanish flu epidemic of the early 1900s here in the US as well. And that was a good story. So she writes good historical fiction. I like her a lot. So I'll be looking forward to reading that. All right, and then on the 21st of December was my daughter's birthday, and my husband and I took her out to dinner, and she wanted to go book shopping and all this stuff. She turned 12, and that's what she wanted to do for her birthday night, and so we went and did that. We stopped at the bookshop, my favorite bookshop, again, down in Tawnytown, and I got 5 books there. So the first one is Norwegian folk tales, and it's just a compilation of different Norwegian folk tales translated into English, and I read one and it was kind of weird, but it was still good, and I love the illustrations, so I think I'm gonna look forward to reading this. I love reading stories from other cultures, cultures that I'm not familiar with, even though they can be kind of weird to me. It doesn't necessarily mean they're weird to them, right? And so it's just interesting to me to kind of like get that initial like, wow, this is so weird, and then over time, you know, once I've been exposed to that story, then over time as I read other things and I, you know, just kind of learn more about those cultures, sometimes I can find where the tie-ins are and why the story is that way, and then I realize, oh, that's actually not weird. You know, so anyway, it's just, I really enjoy that. It just kind of gives me a taste of a culture, and then sort of opens the door to me being more aware, so that I, you know, can learn more and appreciate more about different people. All right, next up is The Diary of a Bookseller, and I just like stories like this. I think it might even be, I don't know if it's fictional or not. So, oh yeah, it's a memoir. So this is from the UK. I think it takes place in Scotland, and it's a bookseller and all the stuff he encounters. And I love reading books like that because, you know, like a lot of readers, my dream is to have my own bookshop that also has crafts and flowers and baked items and coffee, and where I will be busy enough to make money, but not busy enough that I can't sit there and read, and, you know, just like this whole ideal experience, which it probably really isn't like that. And when I read books like this, I realize it's not actually like that, but it's still very worthwhile. So I like to read other people's stories of the bookshops that they run. This book is called After the Fact, The Art of Historical Detection. And this is kind of like a workbook, sort of texty kind of book. It just kind of looks like it's basically a manual for the layperson on how to write about history. You know, what evidence is worth it, I guess. How to ask yourself questions, how to examine evidence, and just how to write engagingly about history. And I want to read it from the perspective of how to talk about or even think about history objectively, and more broadly, just how to talk about anything more objectively. So something that just frustrates me to no end is when someone will have an idea and then they find all the evidence that they can to support their idea, but refuse to look at evidence that does not support their idea or take that kind of evidence seriously. And I feel like if we're going to actually, you know, teach ourselves things and be good students of, I don't know, life, everything, we need to be willing to look at all sides of something, all the available perspectives, right? And think objectively, because are you really wanting to learn, or are you just wanting to prop up your own perspective, right? And so I feel like reading something like this is going to give me ways to recognize when maybe I am being biased to an issue because of my own desires to believe it a certain way. Does this make sense to you? So anyway, I'm gonna go through that. I think that I will enjoy this, and I think I'll get a lot out of it, and I may even use it with my kids in their homeschool curriculum if I find that it's something that they'll be, you know, tuned into. All right, then I found this cool old copy of The Realms of Arthur by Helen Hill Miller. Now, I think that I am going to use this for Historathon next time around. it has a lot of pictures and illustrations and just tells about areas of England and, I don't know, Wales maybe, I'm not sure, where stuff about where like Arthur-y stuff happened, right? And where the different places that have legends and such. And so I think I'm gonna like this, and I'll get into it, and then I will decide if it's actually going to be a Historathon read or a Historathon side quest, depending on if she's taking a factual, you know, if she's going in a factual direction or if she is going in a storytelling direction. So looking forward to reading that. And then I got this book called Ancient Rome, and this again has a lot of pictures, a lot of illustrations, and it's just like a basic rundown of ancient Rome, basic history of that time. And I know very little, and so I like to read stuff like this to just kind of give me an overarching, you know, perspective, kind of like they did in school, right? Just very textbooky, just very, let's give you the highlights and move on, and then go back and read more deeply in certain parts. So looking forward to that. That is on my Historathon Q1 list. So anytime now I can read that. All right, and then finally I got a stack of books from my library bookshop. Now I live in a retirement community. I am not retired, nor is my husband, but we are kind of the minority here age-wise in this community that we live in. The whole town is an HOA, and it's like, I don't know, probably 80% retired and elderly. It might even be that high here. It started off as a resort town in the early 1900s. People would come here and fish and swim and, you know, stay in the cabins and shop and whatever. And it was just kind of like this little resort town off the side of Bentonville, Arkansas. And then in the like 80s-ish, 70s, 80s, it was more like a retirement community because all those people who had vacationed here with their families like all moved back in the retirement age because they liked it here so much, right? And so they started building just tons of homes, and it turned into a retirement community. Still sort of owned by, I guess, the city of Bentonville, but a big old city in its own right, just, you know, not actually incorporated. And then in the early 2000s, they incorporated into a city. So actually it's the city of Bella Vista in Northwest Arkansas. We're right on the Missouri border. And, but it is still, you know, filled with lots of retired people. I'm saying all that so to give you an idea of what our library bookshop is like, because we have a pretty good sized library bookshop, and it's all, you know, funded or whatever, it's all kept running by donations. So you've got all of these people who have a lot of really cool, old, vintagey, neat books on their shelves, and just, you know, stuff that like you want to take the time to read when you have the time to read. A lot of just cool stuff. And they're all donating them to the library, right? And so I love to go in there and get books. And then when you go in there, the majority of the books are 50 cents. No joke. Like, I've gotten so many really neat old vintage books in there for 50 cents that you turn around and look on eBay and they're selling for like $50 and $60. So yes, I have sold some, but I'm keeping a lot in my library too. So, saying all that, not all of these books actually are very vintagey like you would think, but anyway, all that to say, it was a cool bookshop. I love going in there. I try to go in there at least once a month. If you come to Bella Vista, go to the library bookshop. All right, so first up is the Ponder Heart by Eudora Welty. I think this is an actual full-on story. I've only read her short stories so far, but I really like her as an author a lot. So this is a full story called The Ponder Heart. It's a short story. It's like 150 pages. But I like her. I have just kind of a sweet memory of reading her stories when my father-in-law was in his last days. My husband and I went out to Eastern Oregon, and we stayed in this really fancy, lavish hotel. It was like a restored hotel from, you know, the old mining, Old West days. And there was a certain afternoon when my husband just wanted to go spend some time with his dad, just him, you know, just the two of them. And so I stayed in the hotel, in this fancy atmospheric sort of Victorian hotel, and read a book of Eudora Welty's short stories and just loved them. So since then I've been collecting her short stories, and I'm just looking for like a similar atmospheric sort of experience to read them in again, and I probably should just read them. But anyway, I like her. I'm gonna enjoy this story. I know I am. I'm kind of a storyteller today, aren't I? Next up, I got the Heptameron by Marguerite de Navarre. How'd I do? And this is kind of like, it says it's sort of like the Canterbury Tales, where all these different people have a story to tell. It's just a book of stories. It's translated. It says it tells a story of sophisticated 16th century France. So it's translated from French, and I don't know, is this the French Canterbury Tales? We will find out. But I thought that was looked like a good one. All right, and then I got Thucydides, the history of the Peloponnesian War. I figured this would be good for a historathon one of these years. I probably won't put it on my list for this year, but I like to collect these Penguin classics in this, you know, version, the black and the orange. And so I got that for later. And then also same thing with Herodotus, the histories, I got that for later. And you know, I've never really taken the time to really look at like that, but it's not like cool. It's like a really cool little sculpture there, right? And like, I don't know, you can just imagine people that look like that right now. Like, who looks like that? I don't know who I'm thinking of, so we'll move on. Okay. This book is called The World Before Her. This is by Deborah Weisgall. Now this is going to tell a story of George Eliot towards the end of her life. It's 1880 and she's in Venice. She has gone there on honeymoon with her second husband, right? She's living with George Henry Lewes for like 25 years, right, until he died. And it says that she hopes to put her guilt to rest. So she feels guilty for living unmarried, apparently. And so she's going there with this new marriage on her honeymoon. And then it's a dual timeline with somebody who goes there in the 1980s, and supposedly how their stories match up. I don't really know, but I thought it might be interesting. I'm gonna give it a try. I got Innocent Traitor by Alison Weir. I like Alison Weir as a historian. I've liked everything that I've read by her, so we'll see if I like that too. This one tells the story of Lady Jane Grey. Then I got The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Now this book I have owned like so many times, but I keep unhauling it because I'm like, that's so intimidating. But I've read other stuff this big. I don't know what my problem is. So I got it. I don't know if I will read it this year or not, but I am putting it on my TBR. I think it tells the story of Vlad the Impaler, but as I'm going through this, there's letters. And this is Epistolary January. Have you guys watched my January TBR video? I was like, wow, I'm so overwhelmed, but putting another 700 pages on my list, I mean, it's fine. All right, and then lastly, I got this book called Bronte Country, and this is a really neat book full of atmospheric photography and the story of the area where the Brontes lived, right? I don't think it's so much of a Bronte biography as it is like a Haworth Moore biography. It has a map here, and then, like I said, like every page is photography with just little bits of information. Lots of beautiful photography from this area of Yorkshire. When I was up there in 2015, I took a bus from, I think we left from Manchester. It was a really long bus ride. It was like hours, but I'm pretty sure it was Manchester. So those of you who live there, you can tell me if that like makes sense, that it would have been hours of a bus ride. But it was like all on these country roads, all the way to Haworth. And I feel like we should have gotten a train to starts with a K. I can't think of what the town is nearby. And then maybe took a bus just that short little distance instead. I don't really know. But anyway, we took this bus. It was like all day. It was so long. When we got to Haworth, and we didn't have as much time to tour the parsonage as we wanted to because this bus ride had taken so long. But I'm telling the story because as we were driving through, so much of it looked like the area of Eastern Oregon where I grew up. The landscape was just almost identical. And then I noticed the sheep everywhere, and the area of Eastern Oregon where I grew up was settled by lots of sheep farmers. And I had heard that at one point in history, before all the sheep farmers came, that the hillside was very forested. It looked very different than it does now. But then all the sheep farmers came and, I don't know, just like made an area for their sheep to graze, right? So they couldn't be grazing through these piney forests. But anyway, it just looked so similar that I just felt like I was driving through Eastern Oregon, and that was fun. And then looking through these pictures, same thing. So Jane Austen has a quote about like, if adventure can't be found where you live, you must go abroad, right? Well, beauty can be found where we live if we open our eyes up to it. This little story that I have just given you proves that, because if the Yorkshire countryside looks so similar to the Eastern Oregon countryside, then we can find beauty if we will open our eyes. We don't have to fly 8,000 miles, but it is kind of fun to go do it in Yorkshire instead of in boring old Eastern Oregon where you lived your whole life. Okay, guys, that's my book haul for December. It's lots of really fun books. Really looking forward to it. One of the things that I do want to do more in 2025 is to read more nonfiction. And there's quite a bit of nonfiction here. And I noticed when I was doing my story graph that I'm at like 76% fiction and 24% nonfiction, which really surprised me because I feel like I read more nonfiction than that. But then when I looked at like the little bars that tell you what genres you read from, and classics was off the charts compared to everything else, I realized, oh, that's why I'm reading a lot of fictional classics. So I'm okay with that. But I would like to read more nonfiction, and so I think this gives me a good start. All right, guys, hope you're having a good day. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.